what is my definition of success? Because what it may have been 5 to 10 years ago, it's probably not now. And that'll continue to evolve as my life continues to progress. And the same with everyone. Exactly, right? And just the word success in general, right? Think about this, Coach Woody. When people say the word success, it's like our mind subconsciously goes to money. The mind goes, like, when someone says, like, oh, he's really successful, or she's had a really successful year, the old Jason would have been like, oh, they must be really wealthy. They must have a lot of money. The Jason today is like, what does that even mean? They're successful. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
Like, how do you know they're successful? Did they tell you they love what they're doing? Or are you just assuming that they're successful because they have a Bentley or they have a 10-story house? Like, it's like, there are people out there that are making $80,000, $60,000 a year doing what they love on a daily basis. And then you have people that are, and I think they're way more successful than the people making $1 million a year doing shit they hate, working for a hedge fund or a CPA, right? Like, that to me is not success. That to me is the opposite of success.
Yeah, 100%. Right. One of my favorite questions to ask people is, hey, what got you up this morning? And it stops people in their tracks. They laugh because they're not expecting.
They don't even know. Sometimes they don't even know.
Yeah, it wasn't work. Right. And that's the unfortunate circumstances. That
it wasn't doing
so many things that they were not excited about that to get up in the morning. And so for me, the reason I ask is not to be, cute or condescending. It's really to try to get them to, for one, to learn more about what excites them. Maybe it was pickleball this morning. Maybe it was mountain biking. Maybe it was their kids or grandkids, right? To get them more excited, but also to start to ask them, like, to make them really stop and think. Maybe that's the deepest thought they have all day is, what did get me up this morning? Like, what was I excited about? But it also starts to challenge that idea, like you're saying, like, what is success? What does that look like? And to your point earlier, it's however we want to define it.
Yeah, 100%. And I completely agree. And again, redefining and continuously upgrading what is my definition of success? Because what it may have been 5 to 10 years ago, it's probably not now. And that'll continue to evolve as my life continues to progress. And the same with everyone, right? Like, things are going to change. We're going to have different things. Life's going to throw us curveballs. And so again, our job is not to try and control it, but more so be in a place of that center neutral zone of like, hey, good things are going to happen, bad things are going to happen. Okay. That's life. It is what it is.
Yeah, that's great. So back to this idea of the spectrum that we find ourselves on, right? Sickness versus wellness versus fitness. And you're working with people that are in the, not emotionally distraught, not clinically depressed, right? So, as most people aren't. If they were, then they would be a clinical psychologist, right? Or psychiatrist. That's usually the people that are looking at the very, very far end of it, right? But we're looking at somebody who's, if this is the middle, they're slightly leaning towards the sickness, or maybe even more. They recognize they're not where they want to be. One of the questions I like to ask my guests is, how would you label the very far end of that? Like we're talking, we are not doing well at all in our emotional wellness.
So like the extreme would probably be some sort of burnout. So like the difference between depression and burnout is like, burnout is where you're so fried that you don't even have like the courage or you don't have the drive to even give a fuck. Excuse my language, but like you don't even care. You're so depleted. So you can be depressed and be anxious and nervous about getting work done and whatever, but then you get burnt out to where it's like, again, you're just, I don't care. Like I don't care about anything. So that's kind of the far extreme. And again, I've seen this in folks where they are burnt out, right? It's like they're so, and they don't, again, it goes back to the resistance. So they have the burnout feeling, and then they are not allowing that feeling to be there because it doesn't feel good. And so they make it worse by trying to say, I'm fine. I'll be better tomorrow. I'll be okay. It's like, that's not helping you heal. That's not helping you progress.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Or we're turning to other things to numb it, right? That's why we see a huge increase in the amount of drugs and alcohol that are being intaked, because people are just hurting. They don't know the direction they want to take, and they're taking whatever they thought, right? I see it. I'm in academia, so this may be a little biased, but I see it happening from as early as, high school, when you start to be told, hey, you need to start figuring out what you're going to do with your life. Was a 17-year-old who has not been challenged in any way to be responsible enough to take on their own life, because we live in a very, and this, I'm obviously talking about Western society.
Sure.
At this point, there are other cultures where 10 years old, you're probably able to fend for yourself, right? But you get to be 17 years old. Now, all of a sudden, what are you going to do with your life? Well, I have no idea. So what do we turn to? Things that are interesting to us, things that we're kind of, like, yeah, that might be something I could do. And then you're sent to college, where this huge financial burden is placed on you to perform in this very specific thing that you have no idea what you want to, if it's even something you want to do with your life. But now all of a sudden you're, $20, $30, $40,000 in debt, and being told, like, this is what you need to do in order to contribute to society. So then you go 4 years. I have so many seniors in my classes that I teach that are like, well, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, but they've been told, you better figure it out because this piece of paper says you have to do this. And then they get the job, and then they go through the promotions and the promotions and the promotions. And then, they're 35 going, I never stopped to think if this is what I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's, I think you put it in a beautiful manner. I think it's a truth. It's a sad truth that we have when you're right. It's what sort of dynamic are these children? I mean, we were all children at one point, right? So it's like, what sort of programming do we want the future generation to inherit? Because we are all being programmed from the different sources in our world, our parents, grandparents, our cousins, our friends. So from an early childhood age, we're kind of being force fed. Well, this is what you believe. This is how you act. This is what you do. And then again, it's like we have this almost identity crisis of like, well, now I'm 17, 18, 19 years old. I don't know, like, who am I? What do I like? What do I stand for? Like all these things of, again, programming and inheriting, which sculpts our beliefs and kind of our core identity, is ultimately where I'm getting at. It's like the identity of who am I, and who do I want to become? What do I stand for, right? What am I here for? It's not to hoard money and make money. My coach said something like, what do you want on your tombstone, Jason? Like, here lies Jason. He saved more than he spent. It's like the idea of death and thinking about like, how am I going to look at this challenge or this current situation if I'm 85 years old, looking back at this situation, how is the situation going to affect like the grand scheme of life? And again, we get so caught up in the intricacies of these daily challenges and problems. And it's like one of the greatest diffusing questions is, will this matter to me in 90 days? Will this problem I'm incurring matter to me in 90 days? Most likely the answer is no. The answer to that question is yes, this problem or challenge will matter to me in 90 days. That's a trigger, or essentially, yeah, it's a trigger for you to say, hey, look, I'm going to go get extra space. I'm going to give myself extra time, extra healing, extra compassion, whatever it is I need to do to kind of get back to a grounded, regulated state. But again, 95% of the time, these problems that I have aren't going to matter to me in 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. And honestly, if it's going to matter to you in 90 days, in my opinion, good, because you found something worth devoting some time to.
Right. Right.
This is important. Whether it was a tragedy or it was an opportunity, that's important. That's exactly worth the energy that you are currently typically spending because you forgot to pick up the cookies, or you didn't answer that email in 24 hours, or whatever the energy is that we're spending. Yeah. Arthur Burroughs, he wrote, I always forget that book right there, From Strength to Strength. He's a social psychologist from Harvard. He suggests, there's gratitude journals, which I think are phenomenal. I think they're a big benefit. He actually proposes failure journals. And this idea of when you fail, write it down. And then in 60 days, go back and look and say, how do I feel now about this? is this actually important? What changed about my life because of this C that I got on my organic chemistry test? Right. So, and then he says, go back again in another, predetermined amount of time. But it just gives you those reps to recognize like everything that we really think is catastrophic is probably not as impactful as we originally thought. And it just gives you those reps to recognize that and say, okay, maybe I need to reconfigure this idea of failure.
Yeah. Yeah. I have goosebumps right now. So it's awesome to hear you say that. And again, to have change the lens on the idea of what is failure. It's like, well, many people want to hit a home run or a grand slam, but they're too afraid to get in the batter's box because they might strike out. So they're letting the fear of striking out stop them from even trying to get on base with a single or a double or a triple right? So it's like, you can't have both. You can't have both. You can't want to hit a grand slam, or you can't actually hit a grand slam, but not have the potential to strike out. Like, that's just not how life works.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I'm a fairly optimistic human. And so I regularly say there is no failure. There's only opportunities for growth. And people will combat that and come back and say, well, no, if I set a goal to hit, 50,000 in sales this quarter and I don't hit it, that's a failure. It's like, or you set the goal for the wrong reason. Was the goal to increase your sales this quarter? Yes. What did you get to? 49,326. Was that more than what you did last time? Yes. Yeah. Well, then you didn't fail. You increased the goal. You just thought that the arbitrary number 50,000 was the goal, and that wasn't the goal. Yep. It was the process of growth.
Yep.
And that's where I think a lot of people struggle with that concept, is because they get too caught up on the arbitrary numbers that we set for ourselves.
Yeah. And what's awesome about this is that, again, we're the ones setting that rule. We're the ones setting the expectations or the rules. Oh, this should take me 2 weeks. This should take me 6 months, whatever. It's like, we're the ones that are defining that timeline.
Yeah.
So let's give ourselves more time if we want. If using that example, it's like, yeah, we may not hit $50,000 of the total amount, but we're so close. Keep going, right? Like, ignore that timeline that's superficially set in our heads and just keep going. Keep progress every single day. Are we making progress? Are we making progress? Are we making progress? That's what matters.
Yeah. Exactly. Now, that being said, I'd never suggest to people, always slide the goals to make yourself feel better.
I'm not
the type of guy that says, write down the 3 things you've already done so you can check them off your list. Well, that's not progress, right? You're stepping backwards. But it is recognizing that the process and the growth is more important than the number that you've placed on it to determine whether or not you were successful. Did I get better at pickleball today? Did I win? No, but did I get better? Probably. And so therefore I trained, and that was what was important.
Exactly, man.
Yeah. So we spoke a little bit about the idea of the sickness end, and this idea of kind of, it's burnout to the point of almost apathy.
Yeah.
I've burned out so much that I don't even really care anymore. Or I don't have the means by which to understand how to overcome this feeling of funk, as it were. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about the other end of it. So we're crushing it. We're nailing it. We're doing all the things. We're, maybe not David Goggins, because there is no other David Goggins besides David Goggins, right? But things are going well for us. What are some of the things that we're seeing on that end of the spectrum?
Yeah, so I would say the one word I would encapsulate is flourishing, right? You're in flow. You have enough work to do to where you don't feel overwhelmed, but you're also not like, what should I do? Like, you're kind of in that sweet spot of, hey, look, I'm doing the things I like, the things that fill my soul. I'm making progress. Again, from a zoomed out perspective, it's holistically, am I getting all the things I want to get done in a day? Not just work and money, but exercise, reading, journaling, meditation, like fun, having fun, doing like whatever you set. Am I doing those things? Am I getting these things done on a daily basis? So again, it's that state of flow where you're just kind of in your groove, I guess you would call it. That's probably the best way to put it is, am I feeling like I'm in my groove?
Yeah. I love that. I think adding to that, the idea of like, I feel like I'm flourishing. I'm doing all the things I want to do. I have enough to challenge me, which is one of the requirements of flow, right? There's
Yeah.
a book, right there, The Art of Impossible, that talks about flow a lot. Stephen Kotler, he is in the Flow Institute, so he knows a thing or two about it. But the idea here too is that you believe that the work that you're doing matters. Right, because if I'm spending, I think Simon Sinek said this, working towards a cause that you don't care about is called stress. Overworking towards a cause that you care about is called passion. Right, so like if I work 6 hours on something, if it's something I don't care about or I don't find meaning in, then it's going to be stressful. If it's something that I love and I'm passionate about, then it's going to be passion, and it's going to be exciting and be satisfaction. And so a really big aspect of it is like, do I feel like this matters?
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah, that's great. So I love it. So we're in a state of flow. We're doing things that matters. We're in a challenging level. Those are huge. So let's talk a little bit about a little more nuts and bolts about this idea of being emotionally in a great place, reduce stress, doing things that matter. What are some of the things that we can start to measure? Like I've been working with a client 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever. And I want to show them that they're getting better, because a lot of this, especially the world of emotional well-being, it's a little soft. It's harder to put, I can put numbers on a bank account. I can put numbers on my body fat percentage. It's hard to put numbers. It's possible. But what are the things that we start to think about and measure when we're looking at this world of emotional well-being?
Yeah, it's a great question. You're right. It's challenging to measure. I mean, there are certain things that you can measure when it comes to my work. Like, for example, like a sleep tracker, like an Oura Ring, you can track your sleep to see how well you're sleeping. Or things like the Apple iWatch, right? You can wear watches that show you your fitness level, your heart rate variation, all these types of things. But there's also the soft side of things, which is, again, typically more where I'm focused, which is like the results of how you feel, like ultimately like the daily happiness score. How are you feeling overall? Like life happiness. How would you rank yourself? I have my clients rank themselves before and after our relationship. And typically they don't even remember that they did the one, the intake form. So I'm comparing the two, saying like, well, here's where you were, here's who you are now. And they're obviously rating themselves. They're the ones that are rating themselves. I'm not rating them. They're rating themselves. So when they're saying, hey, I was a 4, now I'm a 6, it's like, okay, well, that's showing that, hey, there's significant impact or change that has been made here. It goes back to this idea of, like, again, stress levels and how is your again, your zoomed out life happiness. Because I work with many men, so many men are just so focused on the two big things, money and work. More money, more work, more promotions, more money, more money. It's just like, that's all they're going after, these two things. And that's not what life is. Life is a whole lot more than work and money. And yet we find ourselves, especially now with technology, like I'm sure you've seen it, like 20 years ago, we didn't have smartphones. If we had cell phones, it was this text and a calling device. Mm-hmm. So this idea of this blue light immersion, this flooding of blue light in our lives, where it's almost like at a point where, is there any time throughout the day that you're not in front of a screen? You wake up, you're on your phone, then you go to your computer, then maybe you're on your phone or your tablet, then you come home, you're on your TV. It's like, then you're in your phone. It's like, when are you not in front of the screen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So if you don't mind me asking, are there any questions or things that you're checking in with your clients when you do that pre and post that you're interested or willing to share that you have found to be impactful?
Well, the first thing I love to do is I ask every single client, like, what's a win we can celebrate? What's a win we can celebrate? Because that prompt gives the individual time to think of and feel into, like, well, what is a win that we can celebrate today? Because a lot of times we're not focusing on the wins. We're focusing on the losses, what we didn't get done, what we should have done. Like, right? We're not focusing on the actuals. And if we can celebrate an actual, say, hey, what's either a micro win or a macro win? It doesn't have to be this huge, grandiose, I graduated from law school. It could be, hey, look, like I vacuumed the floor really well. It was a pristine, flawless execution of a vacuum this morning. I'm going to celebrate that as my micro win. It's like awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I've found that high achievers typically hear something like that and they go, okay, well, that's bullshit, because they're like, what's that mean in the big scheme of things? For me, it means that you're willing and open to the idea that you can be successful in one area of your life, which means that you can be successful in other areas of your life. Right? There's a book called Chop Wood, Carry Water. And every time I get to a place where I'm a little high on myself and I'm like, I'm trying to change the world and I'm trying to better everybody's well-being, and I want to be out there doing guest speaking and keynotes and coaching and blah, blah, blah. Why am I doing the dishes? I just remember chop wood, carry water. And from the book, the basic sentiment was a guy who's trying to find enlightenment, and he asks, well, what do you do before you're enlightened as a monk? And the monk says, you chop wood and carry water. He's like, well, what do you do after you're enlightened? You chop wood and carry water. Because there's no difference in your life. It's just a matter of how you appreciate it. And so that's exactly the sentiment that we're trying to share here, is this idea of recognizing the opportunities that you have in your own life that are successful, and being appreciative of that, and recognizing achievement can come in so many ways, shapes, and sizes, and you don't have to always be winning at the top. It's a lot of it's consistency. Can I just consistently be winning and be appreciative of it?
Absolutely. I will take consistent micro wins over sporadic large macro wins any day of the week.
Yeah. There's this huge idea. So like going viral, like on social media. People think, oh, the guy just made one really cool, backpack kid from way back in the day. He made one really cool video and it went viral and everything. And he was successful. It's like, no, not typically. They make hundreds of videos that have 300 likes or 300 views. And then they make one that just happens to hit somebody's funny bone and it sends it, right? But it's the consistent act, day in and day out, repeatedly doing things that help you get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. What other, so you mentioned, asking them to celebrate wins. What other questions do you like to ask to measure their pre and post, how they've been seeing success and improving?
So usually, I'll ask a question like, how are you feeling? Right. And most of the time the answer will be good or okay. And then I'll ask them, okay, without using the words good or okay, how are you feeling? Because, and again, I work primarily with men. And if we can't label or identify an emotion that we're feeling, it's going to be a lot harder to diffuse that feeling, that unwanted feeling, if we can't identify it, if we can't label exactly what it is that we're feeling. So that's why I try to get to like, where are you right now? Where's your, if I were to go into a microscopic atom in your body, like, are you regulated? Are you dysregulated? Like, where are you at? Are you nervous? Are you happy? Like, I want to understand where you're at, and we're going to, again, honor where you're at, regardless of where it is, because that's where we're at. We're not going to try or change or manipulate the motion of where you're currently at. We're going to honor the feelings and then say, okay, what does a winning call look like for you today? What does support look like for you on today's call? If we were to fast forward 1 hour from now, right when the call's over, what does a winning call look like for you? And so they're kind of going backwards to say, okay, well, what would really help me today? Because most of the time, when I talk to someone, a client, when I talk to them on Monday this week, we're going to talk about something different next week. It's going to be an evolution. They're going to be constantly different, changing or evolving feelings and emotions and problems and challenges. So how can essentially I meet the client where they're at and say, look, I want to learn where you're at and what support looks like for you, because it's going to vary person to person to person.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Do you have any measurements that you use that are a little bit more quantitative in nature, in terms of, this month we were on a scale of 1 to 10, we were a 4. We do another one 2 or 3 months down the line, and we measure it then, and we see that there's been a change that way. Do you have an
Yeah.
option?
No, I mean, the reality is I'm more of an artist than I would say a scientist. And so you can measure certain things. Like, again, like if you're physical fitness coach, right, you might look at weight loss or BMI, where I'm like, okay, again, checking in with the emotion or the intuition. Like, how are you feeling? Are you feeling lighter? Are you feeling airier? Are you feeling happier and healthier? Because again, we're checking in with the individual. We want the individual to answer these questions in a way that is authentic and not what the inner PR person may want us to speak, right? A lot of times if we're asked a question, we'll try to conjure an answer that, again, our inner PR person says, hey, this is an answer that sounds good. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's not the truth though. I want the truth.
Yeah.
Give me the real raw truth. Which again, a lot of times it takes 3 or 4 times of me asking these men, hey, because I'm peeling back the onion. I want to learn more about where you're at, man. And so again, sometimes I get on these calls with guys and 40, 50 years old, they've never had a conversation like this before. So for them to be carrying around this weight and this baggage of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, whatever, it's a lot. So again, I have to meet them where they're at. I have to understand, look, this guy has not spoken about his feelings in decades. He's not just going to be able to just come on in and say, hey, here's where I'm. It's like I need to delicately, again, artistically weave my way through a conversation to understand, again, how can I get this guy and help him, first of all, feel understood and heard, but also how can I help him so that when he leaves this call, there's an action, there's some sort of to do for him. There's some sort of, again, my program is action based, and that's one thing that kind of separates it from, let's say, therapy, whereas my program is all action based. I want you to come to this call with progress from last week's call. So that way we're continuously moving forward. Again, I'm helping you expedite your progress through our one-on-one work.
Yeah. I like that. And I think you brought up a good point. I think there's power in quantitative measurements where, you can see numbers, especially when you're talking about aggregate type of information, like, are we happier as a society kind of thing? But you don't want to lose sight of the idea of the individuality.
Yeah.
And you can't get those nuances and those color strokes from just numbers on a page. So I think there's a balance there.
And even like what's really cool, sometimes I'll get text messages from my clients where they'll say something like, my wife said to me this morning, like, hey, I don't know what's gotten into you or what you've been doing, but keep it up, right? Like, it's almost like someone else sees it and then they get told it. They're like, oh shit, wait a minute. That must be like something's working here. Something's clicking.
100%.
And this has happened multiple times with me where I've had, again, the wife or the girlfriend of my client will say, hey, I've noticed a change. I've noticed whatever. And it's like, that is really like the hammering home for them because they get it from me, right? They feel it from me, but then they feel it or hear it from someone else that's in their circle. And they're like, oh, wow, wait a minute. This is working. And again, most of the time, just like I was, they're skeptical. There's some sort of skepticism of like, is this going to work? Or what sort of results am I going to get? Like, is this actually going to impact my life? And it's like, yeah, once you kind of get into the nitty gritty and like, you kind of see where you can go, treat yourself like an asset class. It's like, oh shit, this is actually really working and I'm making real progress here.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a phenomenal point because that external validation and recognition, I think, is huge. I think there's risk involved with being externally validated. You can't get all of your validation from that, but I think it's a powerful data point to recognize when somebody else sees your change. That's when you know that it's been impactful. And as a societal creature, we need that. We need other people to see, oh wow, they are changing. They're getting less hostile. They're getting more empathetic. They're seeing themselves a little bit calmer, less stressed. That's proof that the work that we're doing on the inside is being reflected on the outside.
Exactly. Yeah. And like I said, these men who get these text messages from their wives or whatever, it's like, the fact that they're not working with me typically, and I would say 95% of the time, the men that I work with, they're not working with me for someone else. They're working with me for them. And they know that through our work, their change, their intrinsic change is going to have a ripple effect onto their family and their children and the household, right? So it's like they're coming to me with, they're being raw and authentic. Hey, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to go. So again, to be able to support them in their journey of progression, saying, hey, look, I'm going to help supercharge, give you some rocket fuel. We're going to get you where you want to go a lot quicker. And capital A and D, when life throws us curveballs, we're going to say, okay, we're going to be okay with it. We're not going to argue with reality.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, man.
So you're a man of action. I'm a man of action. I tell a lot of my clients when we're talking, it's going to be 75% philosophical and 25% tactical, right? We're going to talk about why should we think this way, and then we're going to talk about what can we do now. Mm-hmm. And so we're to the tactical part, which I think is a lot of people's favorite. Hopefully, people don't zoom right into the end to get these parts. Maybe I'll start putting them in the middle, But two ways that I like to think about taking action for what's next is for the thinkers and for the doers. So for the doers, we'll go right into it. When you think about what are some of the things that we can start to implement on a daily or weekly kind of endeavor to be able to start to see changes in our lives in this regard, what are some of the recommendations that you would have for individuals?
Yeah, so I want to kind of dumb it down is to make it as simple as possible. So sure. the prompt is, what's the one thing you can start doing today that will positively impact your life? And what's the one thing today that you can stop doing today that will have a positive impact on your life? And we all know what those things are. We're going to identify one thing we can do more of and one thing we can do less of. Let's just start there. Let's just identify what are the things that we want to get better at. What's something that we want to, again, maybe lower. We want to knock down the number of times I get upset at myself or whatever it is, beat myself up, right? So how can we essentially, again, create this narrative, create this mental movie, create this life that serves our highest purpose and not erodes us or drives us into the ground, which is what I'm seeing in today's atmosphere. It's a lot of men and it's a lot of people just beating themselves up and getting so stressed out and toxic and negative. And again, it just compounds, it compiles, makes everything way worse. So it's like, again, just think about what's one thing you can do today that you can start doing, and what's one thing that you can stop doing. That's for the doers.
I love that. That's great. What about the thinkers? What book or resource can they start to dive into?
So the book that I love to the beginner's book I love to recommend is called The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday, and it's 1 page a day.
Yeah, I've heard.
So literally, the book is just 1 page per day, and so it's almost like if you have to be able to read 1 page a day. Like if you don't have time to read 1 page a day, like something's really messed up with your priorities. So sure. I love the simplicity of it. It's essentially taking a Stoic, a philosopher or some sort of idea of Stoicism, and he kind of recreates it into modern day society. So we'll take a lesson from Marcus Aurelius, right, and then 2,000 years fast forward, he'll kind of put it into real day present terms of how does this apply to our real life in 2024.
Yeah.
So it's called, again, the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday.
Awesome. We'll make sure to promote that for sure. And yeah. I've heard of it before. So I think that obviously when you hear things more than once, that's when you know there's something to be said about it.
And it's great. I mean, here's the thing. My favorite part about this book is that I'm never done reading it. Like literally every day it's labeled like January 1st, January 2nd. So I just read the whole book every day. Yeah. And I've been reading it for 10 years or 8 years, whatever long it's been out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I always kind of go back and forth on, because people might go, well, you've read it so many times, wouldn't you want to learn something new? It's like, well, for one, you could probably read this book and something else. Mm-hmm. But two, when does it become quantity versus quality, right? Yeah. They say 85% of millionaires read 2 books a month. And so I think really the power comes from implementing the things that we learn from those books. So whether you
Yeah.
read, 24 books a month, or 24 books a year, or 3 books a year, if they're the right books and you're implementing them effectively to change your life, I think that's where it really boils down to. And if you read this page on April 1st of last year and you're reading it April 1st of this year, I'm guessing you may be able to still glean something from that lesson and apply it moving forward. So I think that's neat.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like you said, it's constant evolution. You're constantly evolving and becoming that next best version of you. And so how can you support that with, like you said, books, resources, action items, whatever we can do to, again, continue to upgrade ourselves and our lives.
Yeah. Jason Komosa, the world needs more of you in it. So how can people find out more about what you're doing, learn about your stuff?
Yeah, best way to find me is just to go on LinkedIn, type in my name, Jason Komosa, Komosa. Just hit me up on LinkedIn. I like to keep it casual, conversational. So yeah, shoot me a note, request me or add me as a friend. And again, I'm here to help. I'm here to provide value and support. Life is difficult. Life is challenging. My job is to kind of make it 1 centimeter, 1 millimeter, 1 inch less stressful.
I love that. Jason, thanks so much for all you're doing to make this world a little bit less stressed and maybe a little bit more meaningful. We appreciate you, and I appreciate you coming on board.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening.